Panic in Times Square. A car plows into a crowd. What we're learning about the investigation. The single greatest witch hunt. President Trump lashes out over the appointment of a special counsel to look into alleged ties between his campaign and Russia. Crisis in Venezuela. The opposition vows to keep protesting as the U.S. offers to help. And hidden no more. Pope Francis embraces those impacted by Huntington's disease as he seeks to remove the stigma of the incurable genetic disorder. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, May 18, 2017. We begin with a developing story in New York. Police say at least one person was killed when a car ran into the crowd in Times Square. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. Investigators do not believe today's incident was connected to terrorism. Instead, initial evidence points to a drunk driver. The suspect's car finally came to a rest against a lamppost and steel barriers, leaving two wheels off the ground. The driver apparently tried to run away, but witnesses tackled him and held him down until police arrived. The accident killed an 18-year-old woman and injured her 13-year-old sister, along with more than 20 other people. The Justice Department appoints former FBI Director Robert Mueller special counsel, granting him sweeping powers. He will lead the investigation into allegations President Trump's campaign collaborated with Russia to sway the 2016 election. Today, the president is fighting back. He told our Lauren Ashburn and other network anchors invited to the White House today, quote, "I think it shows division, and it shows that we're not together as a country, and I think it's very, very negative thing." And that's just one of the comments he made. President Trump tweeting this morning, "This is the single greatest witch hunt of a politician in American history." The president reacting to the announcement by the Justice Department that former FBI Director Robert Mueller will be special counsel, leading the independent investigation into allegations that the Trump campaign collaborated with Russia to sway the 2016 election. President Trump issued a formal statement last night saying in part, "There was no collusion between my campaign and any foreign entity." Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein reportedly appointed Mueller before alerting Attorney General Jeff Sessions and gave the White House less than an hour's notice before making Mueller's pick public. The surprise announcement comes after mounting pressure for the Deputy AG to appoint a special prosecutor after the White House initially cited a memo Rosenstein wrote as the basis for why President Trump fired James Comey. Appointing a special counsel is a move the White House opposed.
There's frankly no need for a special prosecutor. You have two Senate committees that are looking into this. The FBI is conducting their own review.
The move follows back-to-back bombshells for President Trump, including an alleged memo from former FBI Director James Comey, where he documented private conversations with President Trump, in which he says the president asked him to drop the investigation into fired National Security Advisor Michael Flynn in February, just one day after Flynn was terminated. The man who appointed Mueller is meeting behind closed doors with senators. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein is on the Hill today briefing lawmakers. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi joins us now with more. Jason?
Wyatt, two Democratic senators, Claire McCaskill and Dick Durbin, say Rosenstein knew that James Comey was going to be fired before he wrote that scathing note about Comey. Senators say, though, that they're confident in the special counsel. Until today, top Republicans dismissed Democrats' demands for a special prosecutor. But now they're getting on board. You said that the special prosecutor was not going to happen. What's your reaction to the fact that it did happen today?
Well, I think I was referring to that more specifically in the context of a congressionally appointed, which, the law had expired on that a long time ago. But there's been some developments this week that I think have probably changed the equation a little bit. And now that one's been named, the process should move forward.
Democratic leader Senator Chuck Schumer praises the appointment as a first step.
I now have significantly greater confidence that the investigation will follow the facts, wherever they lead.
Both the House and Senate Intelligence Committees are still investigating Russian meddling into the 2016 election. Now the Senate panel is demanding to see the memos of former FBI Director James Comey.
But have you been able to verify that they exist, the memos?
We know that some memos exist.
According to anonymous sources, those notes allegedly say President Trump asked Comey to shut down the investigation into former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn.
Have you heard back from Director Comey and have you received his memos yet?
We have not received his memos. We still have that inquiry. We're going to continue to press that to get copies of those memorandums. And we've been in contact with him. I expect to hear something, I hope, in the next 24 hours.
Two senior Republicans, Orrin Hatch and John Thune, tell me the appointment of a special counsel to investigate the issue actually will allow the GOP to focus less on the day-to-day controversies of the investigation and more on their legislative agenda. Wyatt?
Correspondent Jason Calvi reporting from Capitol Hill. Thanks, Jason. Philip Wegman, commentary writer for the Washington Examiner, joins us here in studio. Philip, normally when a special counsel is appointed, people get nervous. Do you think President Trump should be nervous?
Well, if President Trump has nothing to hide, he has nothing to fear here. And actually, by appointing a special prosecutor, what he's done is he's taken some pressure off of congressional Republicans, because rather than getting put through the ringer on this issue, they can actually move forward and focus on the legislative agenda, something they haven't been able to do in a lot of Trump's first 100 days.
Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on that. How does the special counsel's investigation differ from a congressional investigation?
Absolutely. So as far as a political question is concerned, we saw it in the intro clip there with members of Congress. They're doing these hallway interviews, not focusing on health care or tax reform, but rather answering questions about memos that no one knows anything about. By appointing Mueller as special prosecutor, Mueller can look into that investigation on his own and basically put this to rest for a short amount of time for House Republicans.
Well, you know what? When you think about this investigation, in all likelihood, they're going to talk about firing Comey. That's a big important thing. So Mueller and Comey actually worked together back in 2004. They have a little bit of history together in terms of blocking efforts by President Bush then to reauthorize a secret government surveillance program. Critics say their loyalties lie to the Democrats. Do you think Mueller's the right guy for the job?
Well, I think that Mueller has shown that he's beyond reproach. But one of the things that I think Democrats should be really cautious about is if Mueller and Comey are two peas in a pod, they have the opportunity to see Mueller, just like Comey, go from being their hero to their villain. Because remember, Comey has they've both loved and hated him depending on his analysis. The same thing could happen with Mueller depending on what he finds.
Well, Philip, as you know, there's been a bit of media frenzy ever since the firing of James Comey. Do you think this appointment of the special counsel will help sort of alleviate the frenzy and actually help President Trump eventually push his agenda forward?
Well, with President Trump, we saw this morning that with those tweets, he's more than ready to punch back. And as long as there's going to be conflict in Washington, as long as there's going to be that type of drama, there's definitely going to be coverage of it. So the smart move for the White House right now is to lay low, focus on the agenda, and let Mueller do his job.
Okay, well, we'll see how it all turns out. Philip Wegman, commentary writer for the Washington Examiner. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
The president of Colombia visits the White House. Presidents Trump and Juan Manuel Santos met in the Oval Office and held a joint press conference. The two leaders discussed bilateral and regional issues, as well as shared security objectives. The Trump administration informs Congress its plan to renegotiate the North American Free Trade Agreement with Canada and Mexico. The U.S. Trade Representative sent a letter to congressional leaders beginning the process of revamping NAFTA, which Trump has called a disaster. Financial executives testifying before Congress say tax reform is the way to make the economy grow.
If we're serious about robust growth, then we must get serious about jump-starting private sector investment. And the best way to do that is to fix our broken last-century corporate tax code.
House Republicans are set to take on tax reform now that the health care plan has moved to the Senate. The conservative Koch brothers plan to help Republicans by spending millions of dollars to promote tax reform. An American airstrike targets pro-government forces in Syria. The U.S. military says it hit a tank, bulldozer, and forces setting up fighting positions in a protected area. It's not clear if they were Syrian army troops or other pro-government allies. Also in Syria, ISIS attacked several villages, capturing at least one and killing dozens of people, including women and children. The ambush in the central Hama province targeted villages where most residents are Shiite Muslim. At least 52 people were killed. More than half were women and children. Some of the victims were beheaded. Another 200,000 people may flee their homes as fighting in Mosul, Iraq intensifies. That according to the United Nations, which says nearly 700,000 people have already been displaced since Iraqi forces launched an operation in October to remove ISIS. UN Ambassador Nikki Haley says the crisis in Venezuela is getting worse. Speaking at the first ever UN Security Council meeting on Venezuela Wednesday, Haley says the Trump administration wants to prevent another conflict like in Syria and South Sudan. Venezuela's UN ambassador rejects help from the U.S. Protests have been taking place almost daily for nearly 2 months. National police have tried to stop the opposition using tear gas. Protesters say they have no plans to quit. At the Vatican, Pope Francis greets new ambassadors to the Holy See. The diplomats come from Asian countries of Kazakhstan and Nepal, and African countries of Mauritania, Niger, and Sudan, and the Caribbean nation of Trinidad and Tobago. The Holy Father told them dialogue, not force, is the pathway to peace. This is the first time Mauritania has had an ambassador to the Holy See. Pope Francis is seeking to end the stigma society places on people who suffer from Huntington's disease, a genetic disorder that causes devastating physical and psychiatric effects.
Anche attraverso la sofferenza.
The Holy Father met with people who have Huntington's disease this morning in the Vatican, along with their families, caretakers, scientists, and researchers. With more on today's meeting, we're joined by Vatican correspondent Mary Shovlin in Rome. Mary, what was the Pope's message to those suffering due to Huntington's disease?
Why this disease causes such devastating psychiatric and physical effects that we have to remember that people who suffer this disease are often shunned and made as outsiders. So the Pope's message to them was really, you are not alone. May you never feel that you are a burden, and never forget that you are precious in the eyes of God and that you are precious in the eyes of the Church. Definitely a message that their family members, those who suffer from the disease, and those who care for them, we're really needing to hear today, Wyatt.
Well, the Holy Father also addressed those working to find a cure. What did he say to them?
He, first of all, thanked them. There are some people who have really dedicated their lives to finding a cure, or at least some sort of relief for this disease, which as of yet has no cure. So he thanked them for that, but he also warned them, the scientists, not to become part of this throwaway culture, and specifically warned them against using human embryos. He said it is never licit, is never admitted at any time to use experimentation on a human embryo, no matter how noble the cause or the result that you are seeking to further the name of science.
Well, how important was today's papal audience for raising awareness about the disease?
Well, why the organizers were saying that Pope Francis is really the first world leader to bring their cause to the world stage, unlike similar diseases like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. Pope Francis is the first one to really speak out at the global level, so very important today. They're launching this worldwide campaign, Hidden No More. But more than that, Wyatt, I think when you just looked out on that audience of those sitting there today, some 1,700 people. Those first few rows were full of 150 of those who were actually suffering from the disease. So Pope Francis spoke for about 10 minutes, which was very important. But it was that next hour, Wyatt. He spent a full hour greeting each one of them one by one. So not only bringing their voice to the world stage, but embracing them, making this personal.
Such an important message on an important day and such a great meeting. Mary Shovlin, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent. Thanks so much for telling us about it.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Coming up, Planned Parenthood pushes back against one state's pro-life law, and abortion pills by mail, the danger to women's health.
L'amore all'orgoglio, l'amore al potere.
Pope Francis says Jesus' love is infinite and true. During Mass this morning, the Holy Father said the mission for Christians is to give joy. The Pope quoted from today's Gospel saying, "As the Father loves me, so I also love you." Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. Planned Parenthood is challenging a new Indiana law that makes it tougher for girls under 18 to get an abortion without their parents' knowledge. The federal lawsuit filed by the country's largest abortion provider and the American Civil Liberties Union calls the law unconstitutional. It requires judges to consider notifying parents when a minor requests permission to get an abortion. A new study by an online group providing abortion pills by mail says medical abortions done at home are safe, but critics warn the self-reported research by women on web lacks basic medical information and is dangerous. Joining us now is Chuck Donovan, president of the Charlotte Lozier Institute, a pro-life education and research group. So Chuck, all of the information was self-reported, so there's no independent evidence to support these claims, but the study was reported in BMJ, an online British medical journal. How can they publish a study with no real independent evidence?
Well, White, they shouldn't have published this one. Certainly pharmaceutical companies sponsor studies. That's how they do new drug trials. But in this case, it was an advocacy group and longtime advocates for abortion who had already editorialized in Ireland for medication abortion, or what we call chemical abortion, very interested in the outcome. They're political advocates, and they really contributed a poorly designed study that the BMJ, British Medical Journal, should have rejected. In reality, Chuck, how dangerous is it for women to take abortion pills without medical supervision? Well, the lack of medical supervision is certainly one of the most troublesome parts of this. The medical histories are as reported by the individual. Self-reporting about abortion, previous abortions and such, when a woman really wants the medication, has been promised it for free or no cost, is even more likely to be misreported. Doctors should be present at the beginning and the end, certainly if you're going to do a study, and not have a medical comparator, that is women who would say have surgical abortions. This study is deeply flawed, and as I say, it should not have been published. As you referenced, this study was done in Ireland and Northern Ireland, countries with very strict abortion laws. Right. What needs to happen to protect women from potentially dangerous at-home abortions? Well, I bring this issue home because we here in the United States recently changed the protocol for administration of chemical abortions, allowing them up to 10 weeks of pregnancy. Now that's well into pregnancy when the baby's features can be demarcated and so forth. We have the ability, if we choose to do it, to improve our abortion reporting in the United States. The FDA has not circulated a report on adverse events surrounding medication abortion now for 6 years. They have the capacity, but they're a little bit intimidated by the abortion industry. That needs to change. Yes, and we appreciate your coming on here to shine a light on this because so many people just don't realize how dangerous this can be. Chuck Donovan, president of the Charlotte Lozier Institute, thanks so much for coming in. Thank you, White.
Up next, remembering a media mogul, what people are saying about the man behind Fox News. And on his birthday, we'll look back at the life of Pope John Paul II. Today we honor the first Pope John. He was born in Tuscany and chosen to become Pope in the year 523. He was later martyred for his faith and buried in the Basilica of St. Peter. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. Roger Ailes, the man who built the Fox News channel into a media empire only to be ousted amid a sexual harassment controversy, has died. Ailes grew up in Ohio and started out in local news before working on the presidential campaigns for Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, and George H.W. Bush. In 1996, he helped launch the Fox News channel with Rupert Murdoch and changed the face of cable news. His legacy and career unraveled last year after allegations of sexual harassment, which he strongly denied. Ailes fell at his Florida home last week and hit his head. A family friend says he suffered complications and slipped into a coma before dying. Former President George H.W. Bush tweeted, "He wasn't perfect, but Roger Ailes was my friend and I loved him. Not sure I would have been president without his great talent, loyal help. Rest in peace." And Fox star Sean Hannity said, "Today America lost one of its great patriotic warriors, Roger Ailes. For decades, RA has impacted American politics and media." Roger Ailes was 77 years old. Police in Maryland say DNA samples from a priest's exhumed body do not match evidence in the decades-old death of a religious sister. Father Joseph Maskell has been a suspect in the 1970 killing of Sister Kathy Sesnick, but Baltimore County investigators say his genetic samples do not coincide with samples found at the murder scene. The case is the subject of the upcoming Netflix documentary, The Keepers. The Catholic News Agency has a lot more on this story, including what the Archdiocese of Baltimore is saying about the upcoming documentary. You can read it now at CatholicNewsAgency.com. The remains of a priest from Oklahoma who could soon be a saint are exhumed. Father Stanley Rother was killed during a mission trip in Guatemala. Pope Francis declared him a martyr, clearing the path for his beatification later this year. Medical professionals examined and verified Rother's remains before returning them to an Oklahoma City cemetery. One miracle is needed before he can be declared a saint. Finally tonight, sharing the stories of persecuted Christians and their plight around the world. It's the mission of Voice of the Martyrs. Lauren Ashburn recently talked with one of the group's leaders.
Joining us now is Jason Peters, Chief of Connection for the Voice of the martyrs. You have visited 47 countries. You work all around the world to help persecuted Christians. Tell me some of the stories of the people that you've met.
I was in Iraq. I know you were in Iraq not long ago. I was there again recently, and I remember meeting with this man who had lost everything. I mean, his future, everything that he owned was gone. And he said it with a smile. He said, "I've lost everything, but I haven't lost my faith."
Right.
You know, and it was just amazing to think about the joy and the peace that God has supernaturally given them. And I'm sure you met people who shared the same thing with you.
I absolutely did. I did. You know, one of the things I found since coming back is that Christians don't know how to respond. Christians don't know how to respond here. I know you've written about this. Tell me the couple of ways, 3 ways that we as Christians here in the United States can help.
Well, one of the things that we encourage people to do is to really learn from their example. I mean, if you think about the faith and the courage of these persecuted Christians, it's inspirational. We can look at that and we can say, I can learn from them. I could sit at their feet and be taught by them how to respond to persecution. And one of the things that they are learning and that they share openly is that the power of forgiveness. They're not filled with bitterness. They're overcoming. They're learning to respond in a way that makes a difference in their community.
What do you believe needs to be done on an international and on a U.S. level to help these people around the world?
Well, one of the things I'm excited to see is that the current administration in the U.S. is actually calling Islamic extremism Islamic extremism. And that may seem like a minor point, but it's really profound. And it makes all the difference to the brothers and sisters in our Christian family who are suffering. And I think it's important for us to just be clear about the terms, because these people are radicalized, they are extremists, and they are wreaking havoc. I will say this, though, even in the midst of that opposition and that struggle, the people of faith are shining through. Their lights are shining brightly in the midst of this. I met a guy who was shot in the face, literally. His name was Habila. And he actually said, if I ran into the guy who shot me in the face today because of my Christian faith, I would embrace him and I would tell him that I forgive you.
How many people can say that? And
it's
certainly
remarkable.
Not here. And I think that the other thing here is that people take advantage of their faith and of their ability to practice. You've been to these 47 countries. Jason Peters, Chief of Connection for the Voice of Martyrs, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's an honor, Lauren. It's an honor to be their voice.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We leave you tonight with a look back at the life of St. John Paul II. Today would have been his 97th birthday. Good night, and God bless.